What's up, LEGO builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Few things strike fear in a clone trooper's heart like hearing they're about to be deployed on the planet of Umbara, or hearing that all the named characters got into the gunship next to them. Umbara is a dark, murky place home to some of the wildest creatures and landscape in Star Wars. Today, I'm challenging myself to bring that hellscape to life and build the biggest Battle of Umbara mock possible in just 3 days. And plot twist, it's not going to be the typical 501st battle scene you're used to seeing, but more on that later. If you're ready to see the best way to build with LEGO Dinosaur Tales, don't forget to execute Order 66 on the like button, and let's get to it. I'll be a little limited on size because my big mock table is currently occupied, but I still managed to squeeze 6 base plates on. They do hang over the sides like that oversized load you always get stuck behind whenever you're in a hurry, but I didn't want to go any smaller for the base since I can't hype up and focus a 3-day build challenge on one mock and then have the result be a meager 3 base plate build. This isn't going to be the typical Battle of Umbara we're familiar with Anakin and the boys in blue charging forward on ATRTs, but I still want to create a similar battleground, so on one side will be a hill sloping down to a flat plain. In the hill will be a couple of foxholes with paths leading to them, since this is the Umbarans' home court and I want them to be well entrenched with secret pathways to move around unseen. I want to add a little color to this sea of black, so I'm making the underground rock dark bluish gray, but I'm going to add tapering peaks and valleys on top of it for a more natural looking transition from gray to black. This trench will lead to a hole where the Umbarans can fire on the charging clones with more protection or set up some mortars. Unlike their tactics in the actual show, which was just to crouch or lay on the ground, and we all saw how effective that was. I haven't attempted a large scale Umbara mock since 2020, and that was in my opinion one of the worst large-scale mocks I've built to date, so I'm looking forward to trying it again as a much better builder and more importantly, better filmer and editor. With the whole thing being mostly one color, it can make it hard to see the details and what's going on. As I'm scripting the video, I realized since I decided to make the bedrock dark bluish gray, the floor of this path should have been gray as well, since where would all of this black ground have come from? Looks like I might have spoken a little too soon on being a better builder. I want the terrain to look rough, so I'm going over the base plates with smaller pieces to break up any smooth patches, both on the path and in the actual hole. Let me know in the comments what large-scale Clone Wars battle you'd like to see me do next. Now that the trenches are in, I can tackle the open space between them and get it all plated off. The hill is only 6 bricks high, but the 2 gray base plates together made this thing pretty wide, and I used up a lot more parts than I was planning, and I had to reach deep into my collection to pull out enough filler brick from various storage boxes to cover all the ground. As I moved forward, I dropped each level of plate by 2 bricks until there was just a layer of plate on the base plate to create steps or a rough outline of a hill that I'll smooth out later. Everything was going pretty smooth up to this point. Then I hit a problem that stopped all progress and could very well mean the end of this mock challenge before day 1 is even finished. I had made it about this far when my bins of black plates were looking like the Jedi Temple after Anakin and the 501st rolled up, meaning I've got next to no plate left. I couldn't turn to my reliable backup of dark tan, and I was barely resisting the urge to give up and just turn this into a Naboo mock. I remembered I'd already used some dark bluish gray in the trenches and had the thought to plate off the rest of the ground in that color, so I opened up the Coruscant plate bin and got to work. Dark bluish gray is still a pretty muted color, and even though the terrain of Umbara is pretty murky and black, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say there'd be patches of stony gray terrain. Plus I can go over the top with black plate to further blend it into the surroundings. That combined with throwing just about every other type of black piece I had at this build just barely covered all the rest of the terrain, saving this challenge and my sanity. I'm really surprised I ran out of parts. The last large Umbara mock I did was almost 6 feet long and over 2 feet wide, so in my head I thought I would have no problem doing one this small. But I guess somewhere down the line I must have sold off a lot of black brick and plate and then forgot about it. I actually like having some gray in the terrain. It gives some much needed contrast and doesn't look that out of place, so this might be something I incorporate into future Umbara mocks to help make the ground and smaller details stand out more. Last thing I need to do is add a dirt embankment of sorts for the tank position on top of the hill. I was planning to have more sloping terrain up here so the ground isn't as flat, but at this point I'm just happy the whole thing got finished. I slogged it out and the most boring difficult day is done, and now this is where the fun really begins. Umbara is top of the list when it comes to interesting, scary flora and fauna. Bioluminescent plants, flying stingray, and a true Star Wars classic, tentacled man-eaters. I've got various claw-looking plants to cover the ground and a bunch of black dino tails that I'll use to create a more jungly vibe on one half. If you're looking to get some of these for your own collection, get more of the smaller ones because the big ones can get pricey. To capture these glowing plants, I'm going to stick a bunch of multi-stud headlight bricks on top of each other with a stud in between each one. That way I can bend the plant at different angles. I've got some purple studs that I literally only use when building Umbara, and they work perfectly for these plants. It's not an Umbara mock without including the dreaded Vixus, essentially a land octopus that blends in with its surroundings, waiting until some poor soul triggers a tentacle and dinner is served. The key to getting the right look with this beast is the mouth. The body, you can hide underneath the mouth and in the terrain and cover the sides with tentacles, but you really need a scary looking maw. I used some quarter round pieces to get the right look for the head, then packed that opening with teeth. The body is literally just a box to hold the mouth and tentacles. The reason I'm building and placing this before the plants is because I want to build the foliage around it so it's camouflaged, and so the clones will duck for cover there, not knowing what's waiting inside. Devious, I know, but I gotta make a good story here. As you move down the hill, there's gonna be less and less vegetation, so it looks like the Umbarans posted up in the jungle at the edge of a clearing. The clones will have to charge up the hill in plain sight before they can get to any major cover and secure the high ground. The back of the mock is gonna be more dense, although I don't have as many of the dino tails as I'd like, but I do want to make this look like the beginning of a dense jungle. I also want to cover up the trench areas to make them look more hidden and harder to target. Unfortunately, I don't have enough plate to add terrain detailing to all of the mock, so I'll have to get by with using smaller plants to break up the smooth sections. Making this video has me shocked at the amount of black parts in my collection. Where did they all go? I was able to build a mock more than double this size at one point, and now I can barely cover what I've got here. My final attempt to make the terrain more interesting is adding trans red studs. At first, I was placing each one individually, but by the end, I was so overdoing terrain work, I just started making it rain red. I have one more animal to build, the Banshee, which looks like a flying stingray with a scorpion tail. Because, you know, Umbara just wasn't scary enough. I like doing small builds like this because I don't have to worry about getting every detail right. I just gotta include notable features and fill in the gaps with whatever looks good. I've got the tail, wings, and glowing green parts, and I used a couple large claws to capture the rounded face. Now these things are ready to dive bomb the clones and cause some chaos. This last inclusion is in no way canonical to the actual battle, but I had the idea to include a natural hot spring on one side. With all the mist and I'm assuming warm climate, you're just a hot tub away from a giant sauna. So I pulled up the ground and added in some trans black plate and tile to make a bubbly pool. I ringed that off with some wedge plate, and just like that, there's a nice little spot for the clones to chill after a long, hard day of spreading some democracy. This has got to be the most exciting day because probably 90% of the building is behind me, and now I can really bring the scene to life with the figs and vehicles. As you may have guessed by now, I'm not doing the classic 501st route, but instead, I'm depicting Obi-Wan Kenobi in the 2/12th's initial planetary assault. We got holo updates on what he's up to in the Clone Wars TV show, but we don't actually get to see any of it, so I've got some creative freedom here on what I can do, and I'm going to take full advantage of that and use a clone turbo tank. What better way to cruise through the dark jungles of Umbara than in a wheeled battering ram? These would have really helped Rex and the boys in blue, although now that I think about it, the last thing Pong Krell needed was a turbo tank. Considering some of the insane vehicles in the Umbaran arsenal, the clones are going to need something big because dang, what are you supposed to do against these? They're basically giant mechanical bugs. It was hard to choose what vehicle I would include. I decided on this artillery hover tank because it made the most sense size-wise, and I don't think I have the parts to build anything more complicated. I built the guns, arms, whatever you want to call them, and then connected the two together with a cockpit. Thankfully, I hung on to a decent amount of these figs because if I went to place the Umbarans and this bin had like 2 guys in it, I would have been cooked. And now I just need to finish setting the stage and the battle for Umbara can begin. The Republic fleet has entered the Umbaran system and begun its ground assault. Gunships mounted with lights drop squads of 2/12th clones on an open plain, though the oppressive dark atmosphere makes visibility very low and the only indication of an enemy force is the hail of laser bolts and energy weapons raining down on the advancing clones. General Kenobi and Commander Cody lead the charge. Knowing this was going to be a tough fight, the 2/12th has brought a new Republic weapon, the Juggernaut. Though not having seen much combat yet, the tank has already gained quite the reputation for smashing through just about any enemy position and mowing down all plants or obstacles in its path. But the Umbaran forces aren't the only thing the clones have to worry about. It seems like just about everything that moves has clone troopers on the menu, and the much needed infantry support is being picked off. Meanwhile, the Umbaran militia has dug in and is laying down suppressive fire from foxholes and trenches while their artillery targets the tank. Things are looking tense for Kenobi and his men who need to secure this ridge so the artillery can be dropped in and begin pushing forward to the capital city. I'm a little disappointed in this one, to be honest. The lack of black parts really affected the terrain and it came off underwhelming and does not meet the level of detail I'm used to with my mocks. But at least it's always fun to build with this turbo tank, and now maybe people won't ask for Umbara mocks as much after seeing this. This was kind of a practice run because I'm gearing up to tackle a place I've only ever built once before on a large scale, home to some of the most deadly creatures in Star Wars and this friendly fellow.
Hello there.
That's a wrap for Umbara. Don't forget to let me know what you thought of this mock in the comments, and until next time, happy building.